Window the other. There we go.
There it says it is, Chris.
All right, thank you,
It
Pat.
says we're live on custom live streaming service.
Perfect.
You're welcome.
All right, well, we're waiting on one or two, but we'll get started for this evening. Welcome. It is 6:01 p.m. and this is our Personnel and Budget Committee meeting set for this evening, Monday, March 1st, 2021. So from 6 to about 7 o'clock, might be a little less than that, but myself and Mrs. Duncan will be going over next year's budget and what that may look like. Just a rough draft of it. We'll have a final version on April 5th to present to the public. In addition, we'll talk about potential openings and positions that we'd like to have for next year also. And also as part of the budget presentation, this afternoon I shared with you a Google Sheet that had all the different grants that we received, whether it be through CARES Act funds, ESSER grants, and so forth, just so you can see where the money was spent, how it was spent. And so we'll talk about that and review that also tonight. That being said, I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Duncan, actually, to start with our budget presentation.
Good evening, everyone. In front of you, you have a stack of reports, and what I would like to do is start with the condensed summary report, and this is for the current year, current school year. So what I wanted to do is first look at where we're at currently. As we go through, you can see this report is broken up by function and objects. So this just kind of gives you an understanding of where we're at for this time in the year. And one of the main points is that at this point, we're at 60% of our budget. So we've spent 60% at this point in time. Now, there are some other expenses that we haven't paid a large portion of yet, which is our charter school. So that's going to be one of our larger expenses beyond payroll and payroll benefits that we have to pay yet. We have our Lincoln Edge bills and our regular charter school bills. So those all are going to be some major expenses that will happen as we go through the rest of this school year. So most of our contracts have been paid. That's just, I think, one of the larger areas that we still have outstanding is the charter school.
What's the payout on that? Is it like 4 million?
The total at this point, we'll probably be looking at between 3 and 3.5 to 4 million. We have a couple. Lincoln's Edge, we have a bill right now that's about $427,000, $472,000, I'm sorry. And the issue with that bill is there's a lot of corrections, but how they correct their bill is they give you credits in the future. So at this point, you need to pay the invoice and then they'll give us credits on the next billing. They're still working through, what all will be credited back to us, but it will be applied against the next invoice. Okay. So there's still Lincoln's Edge. We have a lot of the monthly charges for all the other charter schools. Those come out of our basic ed directly. Those types of charges.
Okay. So if it's about 4 million, we're at 60% of budget. So you're talking about adding another 7%. So we're really about 67%, which is good. Expect to be about 75%.
So what I'd like to do overall is just kind of take a quick review of where we are right now. I'm also working with Forecast 5 to do a forecast for the end of the year. With our software change, there were some issues with getting clean data to them for this time period. So we're almost to that point. So once we do, they're going to put all our information into their software. So by the next meeting, I should have a forecast for the end of the year. Also, I wanted to go over the revenues for this current year of where we are. looking at the state, local revenues, and then take a review, look at our revenues for the next year's budget, 21-22, and also then look at the expenditures. The expenditures is a brand new report that Skyward worked with me today to just create. We finally got it created. So there's a couple of little bugs with the current year budget. It doubled the budget, but looking at the budget for 21-22, the expenditures should be fairly close. So that's something that when you look at the report, there may be a few things that we have to go back and fix. So it's been a challenge. So how I would like to approach this after today, then each week I'd like to give emails or send out updates of where we're at, where we were at the beginning of the week, what things we've worked with, changed, and where we're at, so that as we continue along, we'll have a running total and an idea of where we're going to be for the budget. And if there are questions or things that come up, we can address them as we go along. That gives everyone a little more time to kind of digest the information. So if everyone's okay with that process. So are there any questions on the condensed summary report?
So just what stands out to me is the outliers of the supplies, but I'm assuming that's related to COVID supplies.
Most of those purchases are related to the COVID supplies that we had to purchase, which, as we will talk later on, the grants covered some of those expenditures. So most of the COVID items that we purchased were, additional cleaning machines, additional sanitizing materials,
Water fountains,
touchless
sinks,
touchless toilets, soap dispense, all of those types of paper towels, all those things are to be touchless. So all of our things had to be converted. So there's a lot of purchasing of sensors and then the materials to fill.
Did we do anything with the air filtration? You hear a lot about that in the news, that that's part of it.
Yes, we did. We bought
filters that
Yes,
changed
we
out
bought-
more.
we bought
That
no filters
should
to
be
change
in
out.
the revision of the system that we put in.
The upgraded.
Yeah, the upgrade should have had all kind of air filters in it.
Well, so there's a difference between like a regular school air filter, and then with COVID, there was a recommendation to upgrade to, I'll call it like plain filter.
The one room that we went into, and when they showed us, when Russ showed us that one upgrade, he said, and here we put additional, air filters in, which I assume was, want to make it, the air quality too much better. So I think, that should all been upgraded at the time.
The only,
Now, if you put a HEPA filter in, then that's a whole, different ballgame.
right, and that's kind of, so part of what the funds that are going to be available in, I think, either the December and then what's coming up, if this gets passed, like what was approved over the weekend, is upgrades for air filtration. So that might be an opportunity to do an upgrade.
So, as I say, to that point, I know one of the things, potential money that we could receive if the 1.9 billion goes through, we could see an allocation of money of about $4 million to the district. So we could look into air filtration. We also talked about looking into paying off some technology bills with that too, to eliminate our debt to maybe Apple and some other companies, if it's permissible, what's allowed. And then obviously looking at the cleaning, what else we can do with that.
And we did purchase, I think it's about $18,000 worth of filters to go around to each of the buildings and to change them more often. They were being changed on a maintenance schedule, but that schedule has been increased to help keep the air purified. So that was part of the COVID funds. So going on to the revenue, um, expense account summary. Now this lists all the current revenues that we have. And as you can see, we look at the revised budget column and then what's unexpended. It looks like a negative number. That actually means we received more funds than what we budgeted. So far, most of the items are in line. I think the one area that we're going to see a drop in is going to be locally in the real estate transfer taxes. We're also going to see a drop in the local earned income tax. Local income tax can be tied to unemployment percentages. So that's going to, we could see maybe a 10% drop in the earned income tax. Earned income tax for the local area. And then our interest rates too, of course, have really dropped. And that's one of the things when we're looking at our reports and our treasury reports, we're looking at what we have in CDs compared to last year to this year is due to the drop in interest rate. So we're not purchasing CDs to invest our funds because the rates were so low. To get a higher rate or a rate that was worth putting any money into it, we had to go out for a term that was longer than I was comfortable with us doing at this point in time. So that was why most of our money is still being invested, but not in the higher CD, which used to be the higher CD rates. So our investment company they're feeling that the rates will start to go up. They're going to just slowly climb. It's not going to be quick jump back. So, but it's something where we're starting to see. At one point, we could expect to receive about $300,000 in interest. I think we'll be lucky to get maybe $5,000 to $10,000. That's how much of a, I guess you want to say, crash or decline in the interest rates.
Did we see any increase in the IT last year?
We saw just a slight, maybe 5%. We would see more of it, the timing of when things are due. Actually, like the March quarter, that second quarter would have been due in July. So it wouldn't have been quite as much of a decline as this year when we're in COVID for almost a full year.
So that's going to be a budget challenge for this year.
Right, and I've been working with York Adams Tax Bureau. They've been giving me some estimates and looking at where they think that will be in the long term. And they're pretty conservative with some of their numbers, but I feel that what they've given me is I can have some confidence in the numbers. So that's what we look at that in our local revenue. And our state revenue is coming in about, I think it's going to be around 9.3 million. So it's a little bit less than what we had budgeted, but it's fairly close. And I think most of the state revenues, the special ed revenue, transportation are all pretty much on target for what they were planning to give the districts. It's more of the local revenues that are affected.
Does the state revenue include the COVID funds?
No, that's separate. Those are separate grants. Most of those grants are federal. There's like a couple of state, but most are federal.
Most are federal grants, not state. And
Correct.
it's very clear on those that they are not to be used for anything that's sustainable, but rather one-time purchases.
Right. Makes total sense. Are there any questions on where we stand currently with our revenues?
So for the local revenue for this year, then it's about where we expected it to be.
Yes. Yeah, I think we're right on target. So now we're moving into our budgeting numbers for the 21-22 school year. So packet, we start out with our summary. And if we go into the second page and look at local revenue, you can see what I'm showing for the real estate taxes. That amount is without any tax increase. That's just the taxes at the current millage. So I just wanted to point that out, that this is without any increase at this point. Later on in this package, there's some slides that will, some information that will show you what some of the increases would look like if we want to go that route. I have some incremental numbers to show you. Our earned income tax revenue for the upcoming year, it's starting to really rebound. So I think we're looking at having a fairly decent increase, and that is the earned income tax. It's account number 6151. So I believe from what York Adams Tax Bureau is looking at, the unemployment rate, the increase, it should be around $7 million in earned income tax. The real estate transfer taxes, they should be rebounding a little bit. How home sales are starting to really pick up. Homes are difficult to, homes are difficult to find, sales are happening very quickly. So I think that we should be seeing a decent rate of real estate transfer taxes.
When you look at the real estate transfer, does that have anything to do with the report that we saw today at all?
Today we did receive from the Adams County real estate. It's from the county when they take all the districts and they look at their real estate tax rates. They look at their sale, number of homes sold, the average prices of the homes sold, types of home, all those types of things. The average sales price of a home in our area was $185,900, which is actually lower than most of the other districts. And it can play a part in what types of homes are being sold. If you have a lot of condos being sold, townhouses being built, those types of things. So that affects the housing. I think. Yeah, I was going to check Gettysburg.
Gettysburg, I think, was what, 252 or
252,000. So that shows you the difference, the types of housing and the values of housing being sold in just the same county, but just different school districts. So, and I think we were actually the lowest of all the school districts.
In Adams County?
Yes.
In Adams County, yes.
Yeah. The only one that I could foresee being any lower at this point is Big River area.
They were actually higher than
Yeah,
us. I
right.
think they were 210, someone like that, or is that Littlestown?
I think that we have a lot of like the mobile home parks and the townhouses and our small little, I know people refer to it jokingly as Smart Village, but I think it's Oxford Estates over there, where it's just, super small 3-bedroom homes. And that's what we're dealing with.
And to do a quick rundown, for Median Springs, median price was $238,000.
Wow.
Our Conewago Valley was $185,900. Fairfield, $229,950. Gettysburg, $252,150. Littlestown, $224,900, and Upper Adams was $209,900.
I don't know if this will impact, but Conewago, the borough of Conewago, not borough, but the township, Conewago Township, trying to halt all building currently, so that may have an impact
On the continued,
on just continued sales and because there was a 55+ community, they wanted to do something that they declined.
I think we should talk to them and encourage it.
That's kind of neighborhood stuff.
Absolutely.
Complex neighborhoods.
They approved all the other ones, and now they're the ones that will actually bring income in. Decline.
Zero. increase.
Oh,
Bring them in.
That's our government in action.
Because from the county perspective, they consume more services than pay taxes.
Well, yeah, that's probably true too. However, for schools,
Right.
Just something to consider that may affect in the future.
So again, looking at the interest, as you can see, interest earnings are really low, 5,000. We were up to, I think, a high a couple of years ago of about 343,000. So we need those rates to go back up. So we do have some revenue from other school districts. That's for mainstreaming of students. It's also for our LSS class, life support skills class. We have students from other districts that attend. We invoice them their home district for their tuition to be here. So that helps to offset the cost of the classes, the supplies, the teachers, all those types of things. So that's some revenue for the district also.
So do you add that up as a cost per student, or is it weighed out individually depending on the services that they need?
Well, in the life skills class, how we calculate the cost, we take all the costs that apply to it. So for a class, like example, an elementary life skills class, we would have the teacher salary and all their benefits. We would have their aides and all of their benefits, and then any supplies that they have. So then we have the number of students in that class, and we take it by their ADMs. So if they're not on their attendance, but on their ADM, if they're a student all year long, then it's 180 ADMs. So we figure out what it costs for that student to be in that class. And that's how we then invoice the districts based on the ADMs of their student. If their student was here all year long, it's 180 ADMs. And then it averages out to, with tuition and cost of supplies and so forth, it's about anywhere from $16,000 to $17,000 for a student to attend, which the reason that we do that is because if they were attending an LIU class, it would probably be about $32,000 for them to attend. So it's much cheaper for them to come to us. And then it also helps us still employ these staff as our staff, but then they're helping us offset the cost of paying salaries and benefits and all those types of things. Because we ourselves would have to send our students to the LIU and pay a lot more money. Are there any other questions on the local revenue?
Maybe, is there, based on what we saw with the online academy, is there any, do we see any outside district participation
On our,
from a revenue standpoint?
I think at this point, maybe Dr. Perry can address this better. At this point, I don't see that happening. I think that we need to grow the online academy and make sure that our students' needs are being met first before we open it up to other districts.
Great. We're still in the development. So this year's Conewago Valley Online Academy was truly just to get us through this year. So the Cboe Committee, which I spoke to the board about previously, we're meeting, just did again this afternoon to identify what this looks like moving forward. Outside of COVID, how can we be responsive to all of our students? I think once that framework is set, then that would then provide that opportunity for us to talk about that.
Looking at our state revenue, the basic ed subsidy, special ed subsidy, these are all according to what's proposed in the governor's budget. So that's the information in the numbers that I placed at this point in time. Time will tell as we move along whether or not the budget is passed and whether or not we will see that level of funding for our district.
So the reality is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Duncan, but that basic instructional subsidy right now, that's based on, like you said, the governor's proposal.
Correct.
That doesn't go through. That could be anywhere from 3 to 4 million less than what's there.
Correct,
That's something we have to look at also.
right.
This is the governor's, the budget he just proposed that
Yes.
has all the increases.
Yes.
Yes, all this money is based on that budget and the PIT increase, personal income tax increase. That's where that money is coming from. And then they're gonna take that money and, I guess, equitably or fairly funded to all the districts that way. So that all districts would see an increase in what they're supposed to get. But again, that's all dependent upon,
Right.
if not, then probably chances are they would just keep the whatever we had last year, they would keep the level funding in place.
And that was about 3 million less than.
About 3 or 4 million less. I think we were 9 to 10 million less.
Right, we were about 9.3
Yeah.
million.
Okay.
So, and he's looking at increasing the state earned income, the state tax rate that we pay, and also looking at increasing the sales tax. So those are the two proposals that are out there.
What's the gambling and stuff? Fix all this?
The what?
The gambling and stuff?
Yeah.
Might as well just. Yeah. That's marijuana. Tax on it.
So most of the other,
It goes somewhere else.
most of the other revenues have stayed the same, have our gambling, the state property and tax reduction allocation, which is the $920,565. That's about the same as it was last year, maybe a little bit higher. And then those are funds, just to let you know what they are, they're in place of the real estate taxes. So on your tax bill, you would see a rebate. This is to pay the district for that rebate. So each person might see $127, $130 discount on their real estate tax bill. What is funding this is the gambling revenues. So it can equate to about, like I said, $127, $130 per tax bill, but to us it's $920,000. And basically retirement and the Social Security reimbursements are all driven by whatever the salary is. It's about a 50% reimbursement state for retirement and Social Security. So again, that's all driven by whatever our salaries end up being. That number then changes according to what Social Security we pay and what retirement we pay on those salaries. The last area is our federal revenues. Most of the revenues that you see are going to be our title programs. Again, we have titles 1, 2, 3, and 4. Their level of funding is about the same as the prior year, maybe a little bit less. The biggest item that you'll see is the ESSERS 2, which is another grant that we will see and be using funds in the next school year. One of the things that we can utilize this funding for is to offset our Aramark, our first year contract at the Aramark, so that helps our budget out by helping us with that one-time cost. And again, these grants are one-time helps to the district. They're not ongoing. It's just a one-time help.
So the issue that we face is obviously it'd be nice to have $2 million to increase staff, do things like that. But the reality is it's $2 million 1 year, and our staff obviously, but that would be an occurring cost every year that we couldn't keep up. They made it very clear that we were not to do anything like that in the description of what we would do with the grant. It was supposed to be nothing that's sustainable over time that we were to do.
There are grants at different points in time, not these types of grants, but there are grants that can sustain salaries, but then it's always with the caveat that the grants could go away. So you could hire a reading specialist for 2 years and then that position would go away. So, but these grants aren't supporting salaries in that way at all.
Have they said, has the state said anything about it, or read that part of the new COVID bill that got passed over the weekend to fund temporary positions like teachers' aides to help those that have fallen behind. Has that been addressed at all?
That has not been released to us in any way. I know our local IU used to send us state updates along with my professional organization of PASA. And I have not heard of that yet. No, I guess the biggest news that came out was probably this past Friday when Governor Wolf in the afternoon had his, weekly update, and it was about the charter school reform that could happen. And the legislation being sponsored by, I believe it was Senator out of Allegheny County and a representative from the Philly area, I believe, local representative from the Philly area. And then the state college superintendent, Dr. O'Donnell, spoke along with the school board members from state college area about the impact that the charter schools have and how they're not funded properly. So they don't have to take into account for transportation, CTE, special ed, brick and mortar, just keeping up brick and mortar, transportation, you name it. But yet they still get the same amount of money a lot of times, if not more, and aren't held to the same standards and accountability.
Well, the other thing is, not all the schools signed a referendum to, for change. Why isn't every school district in the state asking for, relief?
Asking for what? Oh, they are.
But if you read, the last number that I saw was just over 300. And I thought we had 500 districts in them.
Oh, yeah, yes, but I know it has gained traction. I know our local IU is hoping to have a sit down with Senator Mastriano, Representative Becker, and Representative Mao as a group of superintendents with them to discuss this further. We'll see what happens. I know our local IU is trying to reach out to their contacts and set that meeting up. I just gave today a list of dates that I'm available to meet. So we'll see what happens.
Are there any other questions on the revenue? Can we move to, if not, we can move to the last page. Do you have any questions? Let's move to the last page, and you can look at what this is showing is what our index is, and if we had a tax increase at 25%, 50, 75, and 100% of the index. So the index is 4%. And as you can see on the far right, you see what the loss of funds by having no tax increase, like 25% of index, 50% of index, 75%, and 100%. And then each of the years going out to the right is showing you how that compounds as the year goes on, the years go on, and what that means in dollars, in lost dollars. So I just wanted to give you that information so you can see what the impact is to the district and how that affects the future years when we're looking at things that we want to do or projects we want to do in the future. If there's technology initiatives, different things like that, how we can fund those different areas. And as you remember too, we signed the resolution to not go above the index. So that's why we're looking at just the 4%. And we didn't qualify for any of the exceptions, so there really wasn't any need for us to not sign the resolution. Any questions on the information? Also listed, you see in the middle of the page is the impact of the index on a home that's valued at $100,000. So if your home is worth $200,000, you would double the impact. And move on to the budget comparison. This is the brand new report hot off the press, still being tweaked. between Skyward and I. So the current year numbers, as I said, for some reason, the system doubled the numbers. So what we're looking at is the far right column that says next year budget. This is, again, very similar to the board report you see each month. It's broken down into the function area, the objects. So it gives you an idea of what is happening in each of the areas. This is our first run through the budget. So a lot of these things, that was my proposal to each week keep an update of where we are and what things we're looking at and tweaking as we go along. There's information that'll come to us as time moves on. Again, the governor's budget will have a great impact on what we're doing. The legislation for the charter schools, that will impact how we move forward, what the cost will be to the district. So there's a lot of things that are going to be a moving target for a little while, but the goal is by April study session to have the presentation, final presentation together to present to the board, and then a final presentation to the public at the board meeting in April. That's the goal, the ultimate goal, so that we can have board approval in May. And that gives the staff and the principals time to be able to discuss with their staff what's approved and what's not approved before the school year ends.
Did I hear you correctly? You said the current year actually isn't correct, right? That it's
Right.
okay.
Yes, that is correct. It is not correct.
Because I was just wondering why everything was happening. Okay.
Yeah, it doubled most of it. It's a programming issue.
Yeah, we're not.
I know I'm not
right
good at
now.
math. so I can
Everything,
kinda check,
50%.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, take 50% of everything, you're on a better track, because,
It's software company issue.
Gotta love technology when
Yeah.
technology
Table to
works.
tab, sit there.
So, but you can see most of the areas, our total budget, a couple of the larger items that we have in the budget is, again, charter schools. That, to start off the budgeting process, I placed $4 million in the budget. It's a huge cost. It's one of our largest besides salaries. Also, Borrow Life is going to be about $505,000. So that's also a large cost. Another one is our Aramark. But as we said earlier, we have grant funds that will help offset that. And another large cost area is our technology. So we're hoping that some of the grants coming up may allow us to use funds to offset our leases. Our leases for the upcoming year for the technology is about $553,000. And that's, if you remember, we accelerated the whole R2R process in order to get technology out to our students and to get hotspots and all of those types of things to the students. So that came at a cost to the district, but we were kind of in a situation where that's what we needed to do for our students.
Link that up with Apple.
I'm sorry.
First, link that up with Apple. Or
What's that?
Lease with the iPad.
They're rotating. The leases with the iPads, we have a lease schedule.
Yep.
It rotates every 4 years. So
And
they're,
then talked about changing that for the high school.
yeah, so high school will be coming up here in the next year or two. Like, so we have this year yet, and then the following year, we'll look to trade those in. And we may look to upgrade, we may look to keep the iPad, we may look to see if we can get enough money back from, the buyout of the iPads, that we could get a reduced cost on a potential MacBook for the high school to use. It just depends on what that cost would be. And how much return we get on the iPads, because we got to figure we'll sell back probably 1,200 iPads, and they really should be in good condition. There's no reason they shouldn't be. Our kids have done an amazing job keeping just. I look at year 1 to year 2 now. Granted, it's the second year, And yeah, I get it, we're at home, we're in COVID, it's not every day, but I can also say the amount of repairs that we've had are cut in half already. Kids realize that it's not, just a toy, it's their tool to learn, and they're taking great care of them. So assuming, we can get a good price for the iPads to sell back, that's a nice down payment to put on a new lease that we didn't have before, and we can look to reduce the cost. So it might be, it might be a wash in the end to have a MacBook instead of an iPad, could be a possibility.
Another major cost what was built into the budget is for some new positions. That's already been built into the budget. So actually 6 teaching positions and 1 support staff position, which in the personnel piece will go over what those positions are. So that's also built in into the current numbers.
Or what's the 1290 line? It says other support.
That's 1290 is special education, and it's kind of the catch-all for like salaries and benefits and so forth. What happens with special ed, it's broken out by different support areas. So if someone is a learning support teacher, but they're not specific to autism or emotional support, so they're all categorized then in the 1290s, which is just kind of like a miscellaneous support. So that support area would be include a lot of our learning support teachers. Again, like I said, unless they are specific to life skills, autism, or emotional support, those types of things.
Do we have a very large class of autistic?
Yes.
We
Yes,
really
absolutely.
do. So
Okay.
right now, we have an autistic support classroom K through 3. We have 1 4 through 6, and we have 1 7 through 8. And if you recall, I think it was last board meeting, we approved to move one to the high school for 9 through 12 next year.
Okay, good.
So we will be completely K through 12 in every building having an autistic support classroom. And Dr. Corey could probably speak to this better than I can, but I can tell you most of those students there are not students from other districts, they're our students. And that's why the IU keeps asking us to open up another room, because the majority of the kids are our students. Very few, far and few between that are paying to send our kid here for autistic support. It's mostly ours.
Right, and another thing to understand is, although we're housing those autistic support classes, they are not our staff teaching classes. It's classes that we house for the LIU. Our students are in those classes, but they are taught by the LIU teachers, and the LIU then charges us for their staff. It's a fee for the autism teachers program.
As if you recall, several years ago, we decided to do like the life skills takeover,
Right.
because we had so many of our kids. Then we take on the cost of that salary of the teacher. But the other thing that we lost sight of at that time was everything that they had in that classroom was technically supplied by the IU, which meant then we had to go out and buy those, which we did not figure in on that first time that we've done that. So we have talked about what would the impact be to take on autistic support in our district, as far as having the teachers and all the supports, but then also looking at, what materials are in those rooms that aren't ours, that are belong to the IU, that they would take back, because that would be an additional cost up front, obviously, that we have to take into consideration if we ever decide to go that route.
How many kids would you say are in each group?
8 to 10.
It's 8, I think 8 to 10 is what you can have in
10
each room.
max.
So you got to figure K through 3, there's 8 kids, and then
So about
6.
40 to 50 kids.
Yeah, it's
Lori,
Yes,
yes, Mr. Hoffman.
okay, when this current year being off so much, when do you expect that to be brought into line? And if not, why is it so far off? You feed them numbers, don't you?
Yeah, you might
What are
have
you
to-
referring to as being off?
Current year,
The current year budget comparison?
Oh,
right.
Those numbers are just incorrect because the software program just isn't working. It doubled the numbers. So it's a matter of me calling Skyward and saying, please fix your program.
Okay. So you expect till next month or April at the latest, May?
I expected it would be fixed tomorrow.
Yeah, we're hoping tomorrow, or so that when we present in April, everything will be correct and up to date, and that you won't have to
Exactly.
say, by the way, take 50% off.
Right. It's just,
Okay.
what was just
Jeff
created
Kinshu rule. I like
about
it.
2 hours ago, or about 3 hours ago. So we didn't have time. We were working to create, our software did not come with any programs. It's a unique software that requires a lot of, it has a lot of capabilities, but you have to spend a lot of time building those reports and building the system. So this report was just created about 3 or 4 hours ago. So there's a couple of things I still need to fix, but I felt it was important that you have something in front of you to see the new budget numbers. So,
And they're not helping you build the programs?
yes, they do. I have to just put it in the service call and it's part of our services. Yes, they do help me.
Okay.
So, yeah, this will be fixed definitely by the next time that you receive a report.
Thank you.
On page 4, the 1600 adult education program. It looks like we spent approximately 15,000. And next year, we're not planning to spend anything. What type of adult education are we providing
Oh,
that we might not be?
There's a couple of things that aren't placed in here yet. First of all, we only spent about $15,000 last year. And actually, that's not actual spending. That was just what's budgeted. We have a few adult classes such as woodworking. They had a sewing class. There was I think they tried a photography class. At one point there was a Zumba. It's adult ed classes like that. So if someone's doing a woodshop class, they would pay a fee to come in. I think they would then buy their own supplies, but they would use our machinery to build whatever project. So it's just the fees to pay. The idea of the whole adult education program is it's supposed to be self-sustaining.
Okay. All right. I just saw that it wasn't on here and I hadn't noticed any type of
Right.
advertising or anything.
No, and there's
so
a few things
you know.
that, like I said, I still need to tweak, and this was put
Yeah.
together.
Totally understandable.
But I think last year we didn't have any, well, one, because we're not having people into the buildings. We didn't
Yeah,
have
that's
any
part of it.
adult education last year.
Right.
That'll depend again too on us opening up our buildings and whether or not we'll have adult education coming up for the next year.
Right.
Who's running the adult education programs?
Well, it depends on what class it is. If it, like the sewing was ran by Kim Johnson-Smith, the FCS department, the technology education department ran the wood shop working class. And the photography class, I think, was ran by Brian Hunt in the tech ed area. So it just depends on what class it is.
There's nobody in charge of the whole,
Yes, there is. The high school is in charge of the tech ed, or the whole adult education programs. But as I said, last year we didn't have adult education classes because of the situation with COVID.
the one person at the high school that's in charge of it?
Maybe Dr. Bowman. Dr. Bowman.
It most likely would be Dr. Bowman or Mr. Little. Obviously, Mr. Muller used to be his thing when he was the
Mr. Muller
assistant
used to be.
principal. And now obviously it would probably fall to Mr. Little or Dr. Bowman right now. But obviously, I mean, we're not advertising right now for anything just because we're not allowing anyone to use our facilities anyway.
Correct.
But in the future, yes, it would be one of those two. charge of it to get stuff out to the community so that, yep. I know where you're going with that, Mr. Huffman. I can read your mind.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep, I know where you're at.
Lori, is the 5,100 on the second last page, is that the,
That's our bond payments for,
that's wrong?
yes, that's the principal and interest payments for next year. And then there's an offsetting revenue, which is our reimbursement. It's about $665,000 is the reimbursement from the state for some of the bonds that are reimbursable. So. Are there any other questions on the expenditures? As I said, this is our first walkthrough, and each week we'll continue to have more information and continue to receive reports. And I'll have the budget comparison report, the current year fixed, and then we can all, as you have questions, you can send those and we can address the questions as we go along.
Well, let me comment that this breakdown is much easier to follow than anything we've ever had in the past. It's more self-explanatory than what it used to be. So I think this is a good thing. Now, if the program starts plugging in the correct numbers, then Mr. Huffman will lose his mind, because we start seeing those numbers and think, holy cats, and things are,
Right.
we got to change things around. But no, this is a very good comparison. Much better than what we did before. And then before, you tried to explain it, and we're not able to physically see exactly where it's going to. That's why I asked about the autism support, because that figure seemed like it was pretty high. And I wanted to make sure that, in fact, we are supporting all these kids that,
Yes, we are,
okay, and it keeps growing.
right.
Since now that we've gone into high school, it's going to be even greater.
Right, and one of the things, another point to what Dr. Rita still was saying about bringing those types of classes on board, there's specially furniture that's needed, special types of equipment and things like that. So it's much more than just hiring a teacher to teach the class. It's all the supplies, the furniture, and then you need people who are able to handle the behavior and the different elements of the class.
Stimulus, I would imagine.
So,
is huge.
yeah, so there's a lot more to it and we learned through taking on the life skills class. It was a challenge, but we got through it, but we learned a lot. So I'm glad that we took that on first before we would have ventured into something that was a lot more complicated.
To make a move like this, obviously, I mean, even when you look at like an autism classroom, therapists,
Yeah,
we don't have therapists, but if we were to like move, that would be another position to hire.
Right.
Not you.
Right. So how the LIU, the Schedule A.
Cafe, I guess a cafe kind of thing, and then you have to buy the service from the IU, which then they up their price even more. They're gonna, if they're losing money they're gonna get their money one way or
I was gonna
another.
say, didn't they up our price? I mean, we took some away and we ended up paying more because then they revised their system.
Right. Well, what happens is when someone pulls out of the IU and they take back their own classes, the IU still has their same overhead and their same staffing.
Yep.
So what happens then is that it's less districts and students to share the cost. So the cost goes up for those that are still remaining. It's the same thing with the transportation. If we have a van that holds 10 students and we decide that we're going to pull 2 of them off, but we leave 2 of our students on, it's not going to benefit us because now the other 2 students we're going to pay more to transport them. It's a set price for that van, and whether if you have 10 students on it, you think you're going to save money, but you don't. You still have other students on there. The costs for those students remaining are going to go up. So they still have their overhead and their costs. Are there any other questions? And just while we're on this LIU, just to explain a little bit, the Schedule A, so our cost for our special ed department, we have programs that the LIU has, so those are charged to us. But then, as Dr. Rita still said, if we have our own life skills class, but we have students who need speech or any type of service such as that, we do not have staff that perform those types of services. So we have to purchase those services from the IU, and then that's an additional cost. The student, if they're in their program, all those things are inclusive in their program, but if you're not in their program and you're like here in our life skills, it's like an a la carte type of purchasing. So of course the cost is more. So those are things, it's kind of a complicated situation.
It's almost a deterrent at times to want to take something back.
Right.
If you, if we would need a therapist and you didn't use the IU, can you go out to the,
Well, we'd have to hire somebody.
We'd have to
right,
hire
but
someone.
then they would,
They would become our employee.
they might be cheaper than they would be coming through the IU.
Depends.
It depends.
Okay.
It depends whether they can, some of our students that still have services are placed, it depends on how many students we would have here who would need their services. We can have students who need speech, but they might be at York Learning Center, or they might be at some other location. If they were all locally placed and we hired someone, then it may work out. It just depends on who needs speech and where they're located as to whether it's beneficial or not.
If we ever get to that point, we'll obviously, I mean, with Lori and I mean, with Mrs. Duncan and Dr. Corbin, they would sit down and they would figure out exact costs for the district, thinking of, even furniture, supplies, materials. Thinking back to when we made that life skills change, we didn't have any of that in there. And we definitely, to Mrs. Duncan's point, and I know you said it too, Mr. Groff, we ended up having to pay a little bit more than we thought we were going to. And it was supposed to be a cost savings in it. And it is now that we're finally moving on, but that initial first year or two was definitely not a cost savings. And when you make a move like this, you want to make sure that it's a cost savings pretty much right away or within that time period of 1 to 2 years.
Are there any significant acquisitions planned for next year?
In regard, well, you mean like for personnel or?
No,
Probably.
yeah, kind of like the roof.
So
service.
so today we did get the final estimate on the roof for the next two phases. That one phase will happen this summer for CBIS, and then the next phase the following summer. We're going to put on hold right now until the roof gets done. The next big probably thing that we would do would be the floors at the high school and the middle school, the carpeting, getting rid of that, having the asbestos removed, and having everything tiled. Those would be the two big projects we have. Something that I'll talk to you tonight about is the feasibility study and what that means for our district based on that demographic study that was done. And that will indicate, that feasibility study will really give us a better picture of what big projects we will have in the next 5 to 10 years, looking down the line here for Conewago Valley. Those would be probably, big acquisitions, I would say, or big things that we would need to do with the district.
For the carpeting, part of the other literature I've read or articles I've read is that asbestos removal is another one of those targeted things.
Yes.
For COVID funds.
So we could be doing that with this potential money that we get to offset that cost. It's just a matter, I'll say, we came down to the wire with Conewago Township Elementary, making sure that everything is tiled and finished. And I think moving forward, if we did something like this, and I would look to Mrs. Duncan probably, for her opinion on this, but I would want to make sure that if we did that, we outsourced everything. And I don't want this to come across the wrong way, because I know Mr. Mern does an incredible job for our district, but he needs to worry about it.
Yeah, and then there was no way it was done. You can smell it.
Okay, I'm just one.
And, but he does an incredible job, but he's one person.
Right.
And this, especially the middle school and high school, would be a tremendously big job that I want to outsource that to make sure that we were not under a time crunch and that Mr. Burns' other duties would not fall to the wayside or not fall on someone else with everything else that's going on in the district, that we can make sure that those still get done, which might fall within that realm of the 4 million easily.
The project's large enough that you would need to probably split it over 2 years.
Yes.
Do one building. You'd have to do it, of course, in the summer because of tearing up the rooms and things. But it's large enough to have to be done over two summers.
Right. Hindsight's always 20/20. I know we pushed a big project with the
Well, the
HVAC.
welding was the example, as a big example. I mean,
The HVAC should have been a two-year process,
Right.
probably focusing on one building then the next instead of trying to do both in the same summer. But, I mean, you live and you learn, like you said.
Right. But they claimed there would be no trouble.
Yes,
We lived on the premise that when we signed that contract, there would be no problem whatsoever. And there was problems from day one, so.
there were.
Are projects like this going to be impacted by the feasibility study? Even though we know that there are going to be things that need to be done,
Yeah, yeah, and this is kind of my report tonight, and I definitely don't want to get off,
well,
but.
we can wait then. That's
We can wait,
fine.
But I'll
If
tell you,
that's part of
the
it.
feasibility say what part of that process and actually we have a meeting next Tuesday with them in the afternoon, is they look at the district, they come in, they do a walk through the district, they talk about improvements, they talk about a 10-year facility management plan for us. And that would probably be part of that process, like looking at, you need to get rid of this carpet because blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Here's what that
Well, I'm
costs.
thinking if we're seeing feasibility, like if we're seeing all this growth and we're looking at a potential new building and that kind of stuff, excuse me, or in retrospect, if we're not looking at a new building and we're looking at enhancing what we have, then it wouldn't make sense to do it
So part of that
twice.
feasibility, they look at additions, they look at renovations.
Right,
The idea is, it's great if you build a brand new school and it's up to date and modern, but if the rest of your school doesn't match it.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. So then when they look at that, they look at what needs to be done to make sure that everything's up to code and moving forward so that a kid comes, let's say, from a new elementary school and they go into another building, they're not going from here down to here. There's hopefully just moving along and all the
Right.
facilities and all the equipment's the same, to the same level and standard.
So that brings us to looking at, going back to our revenue packet and the revenue summary, the front page. As you can see what the local, state, federal revenue, and then what our preliminary expenditures are and where our shortfall would be. And again, remember that the local revenue, this is without a tax increase. This is just as currently at the current tax rate.
Which packet is this?
The front page.
On the front page. So as I said, as things occur with the budget from the governor, information that we receive on charter schools, all of these things will continue to update and change the numbers and provide updates to you on a weekly basis. Also, I guess the next thing that you would like to go into is talking about the,
Yeah, we just talk about the position. She mentioned about she built in the personnel into the budget. So one of the things that I did not share with you today, but when we look at new positions, potential new positions, she mentioned 6 teaching positions that we'd like to do and one, I guess, clerical position. So.
Doesn't fall under executive.
Nope.
Okay,
No, we're good because this is personnel and this is all part of the budget.
okay,
So when we look at these potential positions that we would like to have for next year, one of those positions is a librarian K-3. We have one for 2 buildings to share. So the reality is kids might have library one day and they don't have an actual librarian in there. They have an aide instead. So the idea is that we have a full-time librarian in each building. Obviously, students are getting that service every day along with our librarians, and you saw the change in the media centers to allow more STEM opportunities, science opportunities, math, e-reading opportunities to happen in the media. So library isn't just for signing books out anymore. It becomes an actual class where they get to practice and learn.
Dr. Rizzo, didn't we do that last year? I can't remember us talking about it.
We did talk about it last year.
Okay.
Great memory. I like that.
Try sometimes.
Unfortunately, cuts had to be made last year, balance our budget. And so that was on the wish list, just like it is this year. On that wish list also, thanks to Dr. Perry and Dr. Corbin, we are having, I'm very excited, most likely June, I believe. Dr. Perry will be presenting a gifted plan for the district. Much overdue and much needed, but part of that plan does ask that we hire a gifted teacher K through 3 to cover both buildings. And that is a little more feasible as our caseload numbers for gifted K through 3 tend to be low. We really don't identify kids most likely to 3rd grade unless they come into our district already with a gifted IEP. So we will be able to provide gifted services K through 3 in both buildings and also provide enrichment to students in the classroom, which will be new also. Another thing we're looking at is at our middle school, we're looking at 2 classroom teachers for our middle school. Right now, if you look at the way our middle school is set up, we have a 7-1, a 7-2, we have an 8-1, and we have an 8-2. And if you recall, we have that combination team of 7-3, 8-3. Probably, I don't even know how long ago that maybe Mrs. Duncan knows, but I know there were cuts made or furloughs made and a couple of those teachers left, and we just never replaced those positions. So to get back to have 3 full teams at each grade level, especially with the growth that is projected, could be very nice for our middle school. So we could look at the potential of, right now, you look at someone like Mr. Angelini, who is a social studies teacher and a language arts teacher. He would then decide what I'm going to be, language arts or social studies, whichever one he chooses, we would advertise for the other one. Right now, I believe it's Mrs. Wilson. She does science and she does math. Same thing. She would probably choose science because that's what she was originally, and we would look for a math teacher. And that would allow us to have a 7-1, 7-2, 7-3, and an 8-1, 8-2, 8-3, allowing us to really potentially have even smaller class sizes and allowing us to truly use our resources a little bit better in the middle school. And then in addition, the last two things that we would look for, one would be a special education teacher, and that would be to be determined where to place it, and that would be based on caseload numbers. So the state, I believe, says on a normal caseload, Dr. Corbett could probably answer this next week again, but I think you can't have more than 25 on a caseload per teacher of students. So once you hit that 25, you're like, okay, what do I do with the other 8 kids, let's say, that you might have? Well, we're out of compliance. We're not following the regulations and the rules of special education, which can be very costly at times. So to have a special education teacher to be able to say, all right, they're going to go to CVIS because they have the most kids with IEPs, allows us to then reduce that caseload number to meet the needs of the IEP. And the final position, something that we need to look at is, as you know, we were very fortunate to get the grant for the greenhouse for $100,000. Well, the greenhouse is great, but you got to have the approved agricultural program to go with that. So we would look to hire a tech ed teacher with their degree in agriculture so that we can move forward with an approved ag program through the state and have it PDE approved with the wonderful work done by Dr. Perry.
Would that be at the high school?
That would be at the high school, yes. So those would be our 6 positions that we would look to add this year. And what we're doing next week, I'm meeting with our administrators. And I guess we're doing what we call we're going to try a 60 for 6 program, we call it. And what we figured was we have about 337 this year students that are out of the district due to charter, cyber, whatever the case may be. 149 of them are going to Lincoln Edge, but that still leaves us about 200 that are out in cyber world or charter world somewhere. We figure it's about 10,000. If you recall from last meeting, I said it was about $10,960 per student. We can pull back 60 of those kids to our school, put them in CBOA, put them in our own online academy. We'll have a savings of about $600,000 if we do that. The cost of 6 new teachers, $600,000. So we're calling it our 60 for 6. And our administrators and us will be calling parents. We have a list of students and where they're at. We're going to be calling just to say, hey, what can we do? What didn't go well? What can we change? What can we offer? We need you back. We need you in our colonial family. What can we do to make that happen? And that may help with this process also. And then the one clerical position we'll look for is to help out our award-winning Best in the State Business Department that we have with Mrs. Duncan and her group. And we'd like to potentially hire a payroll person. We had talked about this prior. And so we were going to try to do that a little bit earlier this year, and then we decided to wait due to the fact with the new software and Mrs. Duncan getting to know that, and the rest of her department getting to know that, and hopefully not hurting each other in the process of getting to know that. There are days that we know we just don't walk down that hallway when Mrs. Duncan's on with Skyward. So, but for her to get to know that, so if we bring a person in, she can sit down with that person, train them, have them ready to go to do payroll and any other services that they may need. They are understaffed for a district of 4,000 kids, 250 teachers, and probably almost 500 total staff. For 1 to 2 people, 3 to really handle all that is a lot. To have a 4th would be nice to have. Those are the positions we're looking at.
Hey, Chris.
Question.
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bill.
What happened to our ag teacher we had?
You talk, Mr. Jones?
Yeah.
We still have him.
Why would we find another ag teacher then?
So he is moving over to the world of welding, and he's becoming our certified welding teacher so that we can have an approved PDE program in welding.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, he's going back to Penn State, getting his degree, doing all that good stuff, so that we can move forward with welding.
Getting back to your positions, this goes back to Dan Trimmer days and even Dr. Spangler. For a while there, when people were retiring, we were not replacing.
Yes.
And we started, 1 year we retired 10 people and did not replace them. And I said from the very beginning, this is going to come back to haunt us. But we hit some really slim years there where if we didn't do that, we weren't going to make budget.
Yeah.
So we brought back one or two, but when you let 10 people go at one time, that's a big chunk to try to bring back.
And
So
I say these are new positions.
we're still filling
We're still
back in
filling
the
and trying
holes
to get caught up.
that we made.
Right. It's new to us.
Yeah.
So,
So this does not fall back on you. This falls back on former regimes where they just didn't hire the people back.
well, it's a great way, good or bad, it's a great way to cut your budget and to balance it, because
Right.
it's a recurring cost that you lose. And during the times, like you said, there were just that depression, there was just a downslide, and this was a great way to do it at the time. Knowing what we know now, hindsight's always 20/20. We can't look back. We just look now and we look forward. And if we can, these positions help us out greatly. But like I said, we're going to do our part as a district, and we're going to reach out to families and try to reduce that cost a little bit so that this may be a little bit more plausible to happen for next year.
Chris?
Yes, Eric, go ahead.
Is there any way to, moving forward, these new hires and we have predictions and, we're getting all those numbers. Any way to, I guess it's a near impossible guesstimate that a CVOA continues to do well and they build upon that and brainstorm and ways to make it better and make it attractive for kids to come back. Any consideration to maybe some other kids will leave the brick and mortar in our high school and go online? I mean, so we're looking at numbers in classes, but can we, any way we can predict that if they're all going to stay, if CVOA excels?
I think when you look at what we're, when we talk about CVOA, one of the things we're talking about is what it looks like at the high school, because CVOA is going to look different at the high school than it would at the elementary level. And one of the things we might look at, and I know Dr. Perry talked about in her meetings, is the idea of maybe a blended model of learning at the high school level, where kids are in school and they're there maybe for some of the hands-on things that happen, but then they do some of the coursework online. So it could reduce some class size, but they're still going to be physically be in our school. Or they could have the option not to be in our school because they want to do the work remotely. But the idea is it would be a blended model, allowing them that opportunity to meet with the teacher face-to-face also at times. Because even now we're hearing from our CVOA students and parents. I just had a meeting today with some. But they like the online component and they like that freedom. If they wish there were times that they could just drop their kid off at school, meet with the teacher to get some extra help, not through Zoom, but just in person. And so definitely at the high school level, that's something we're looking at, because obviously the students have a little more freedom, especially if they're older, to get back and forth to and from school. But also just the use of the transportation to have a kid come in the morning, do some classes, and then they might go remote for half the day and just spend their time in the library working remotely. But if they need help, there's a person there to help them. And I think that would be probably the biggest difference between us and a normal cyber charter school, is having that live person there to help them.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious that if, you say the numbers project extra teachers, whether if we lose some of those kids due to something like that, would that still, or we're still going to have a need for those teachers in the next couple of years regardless?
I think we will, because I think regardless right now, when you look at class size, I mean, we're averaging at the high school on a normal non-COVID year, probably 25 to 30 in a class. And we know even if kids go to our CVOA, maybe you take 5 kids out of the class, you're still looking 20, 25 in a class. Reality is, it will hopefully reduce the cost that we pay to cyber charter schools to have it here, but I don't think it's going to reduce our class size, because at the end of the day, I'm hearing loud and clear from our parents. They want in person and they want them back. So
I just want to make sure
What's that?
I just want to make sure that, we're,
Yeah.
as long as we have the money coming back that we're putting out, because it's,
Well, the money comes back.
it's creeping up. Yeah.
Yep, the money comes back in the sense that we're not paying the charter schools for, $3.5 million. That's where we gain that money back. It offsets the, it allows us to do everything that we need to.
Yeah, it was nice they came in and got their picture taken for a photo op.
Who's that?
The Mal and them. I saw they came in and got their picture taken. Did you post something? They came in. What group was that on Twitter? They won't come in any other time.
Oh, I don't know. They're coming
Through
in.
the school.
Oh, they're coming in next week. Actually, this week. They're coming in this Wednesday at 1:00. But I just got an email saying that they both of them can't make it. They're sending someone in their place. So
Exactly.
To be fair, Tornecker never said he could make it because he was busy, because I know he's got his budget hearings and everything going on. I know Mr. Mouse said he has something happening now that he can't make it most likely, and I know Senator Mastriano had always planned not to make it and send someone in his place. So
Whatever.
Hit your button when you're talking.
Oh, sorry. You didn't hear
Thank
you
Mr.
must have
Hawk.
heard the profanity then. Sorry.
It's your kid show.
For the special ed teacher, is it some kind of funds that we might, is it access funds?
So yeah, so there is a possibility with the special education teacher, depending on the kids we have and how we rate them, some of that access funds can be used to pay for the teacher to offset the cost. Absolutely.
Okay. And then for the middle school, where's the wave? Because we've been juggling, I think it was through elementary school teachers.
The wave is in 7th grade right now, the largest class.
Oh, my daughter's class. What's out that?
Yep.
I never knew.
Yes, they're the largest right now in 7th grade. So next year they'll be 8th grade. And this year works great because it's hybrid. The classes aren't big, but reality is, it's my goal, quite honestly, and I'll be just, that next year we start the year, everybody's in and we're going and we'll figure it out as we go. That being said, the class sizes will be back up again and the rooms will be filled for sure. So that is our budget and personnel. We obviously went over the hour. We're at 7:22. But if there's no other questions or concerns right now, we'll move on to the agenda itself. We'll go to finance. Obviously, number one, we will pay the bills like we do every month. Number two, we'll recommend that we get the monthly reimbursement voucher for school lunches. Number three, we'll look to approve the Lincoln Intermediate General Operating Budget for 2021-2022 school year. We do that every year. And then number four, approve the contract between Conewago Valley School District and HAP to proceed with phase 1 and phase 2 of the roof coating at Conewago Valley Intermediate School. And that will be at an approximate cost of, I believe, $550,000 to almost $575,000, I believe.
It's a little short of 500,000.
Yeah. So that new updated quote was sent to me today, and I'll share that with the board tomorrow so that you can see it, and then we'll put a cost to it in next week's agenda so they actually know the cost.
258 for the one phase and 225 for the other.
Okay, 258 for one and 225 for second phase. So
Was this a bidded project?
that's for the roof coating at Conewago Valley Intermediate School.
They're co-stars.
What's that? And their co-star, yes.
What's that?
Their co-star, meaning that they're recognized by the state as a,
The state.
But it wasn't bidded.
it does not need to bid because they're co-star and the state recognizes them as one of the lowest in the state.
Why did we get it so far away? I thought it was years and years that we had to bid any project over so many $1,000s. Now we don't bid anything anymore.
Well, no, we do, and we will. So I think when it comes, you look at co-stars first, correct, Mrs. Duncan?
Right, there's several mechanisms that you can avoid so if we would do the bid process, what we would have to do is we would have to have Stock and Leader write up our specs and contract. And then we would have to formally advertise for 3 weeks and then review the bid and then secure a bond and so forth. So what this does is there's co-stars, there's state contract. These different items have already gone through the bid process. So you can utilize those costs and save yourself the time and cost of advertising and getting specs and different things. Basically the advertising process. It saves you time and money in advertising.
Attorney fees.
Right. And so that's why we have utilized those types of bids. And what happens with the roofing is some of our projects are they fall in the gap of either they're too big for the local companies or they're too small for the big companies. So that's usually what happens is they fall in that gap. So we've utilized co-stars and the state contracts before, and we've had good results. I mean, Jeff's very, very thorough with the contractors coming in and making sure that that's all done to our needs and to what we expect to have done. We do bid things that are over, there's state limits every year that changes a little bit, but anything over, I think it's $20,100 has to be bid. Unless you use CoStarz or the state contracted prices.
And the state has already vended these companies, so
Yes,
in other words, the recommendation is there. We don't have to worry about that, this is somebody, some fly-by-night coming in and doing
yes.
a half job, so.
Do you trust the state to vend a company? Really?
I'm just, Bill, I'm just saying what Mrs. Duncan is saying, these companies are already vetted by the state. They
Yeah, I get all that. It just seems to me that as much money as we spend and we don't bid these projects out, and I get the whole thing with state approved companies. I would just like to see what another company, a reputable company with the bonds and everything that they need to have would bid a project like this. It makes it a lot more work for everyone. Oops, I get it, but just to go away from bidding, you know, we got burned here pretty bad the last couple of years on things that we did and should have bid.
What
So
things would that be? I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Is the roof project, is that planned, or do we have an issue?
I'd say it was planned and not planned. What I mean by that is we knew that the roof was getting close to the end of its life. The building kind of snuck up on us. And what I mean by that, it's always, CVIS has always been our newest building. Well, CVIS turned 16 this year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's driving. Who knew? And but you know, and everyone just thinks, oh, CVIS is the new school. CVIS is the new school. Well, it's 16 years old now, and so now it's not so new anymore. And it's had its wear and tear and years on it now, and you know, it's time to make sure that we are taking care of it.
I'm all right moving ahead. I just need to throw it out there that we stopped bidding things. We got burnt really bad with this whole thing with the air conditioning, the VAC and all that stuff. Let's not go back to that route again.
Absolutely.
How many times did Russ come to our meeting and, well, we got to add another 100,000, we got to add another 200,000 or whatever. It was just continuous every month that we added to that project. So again, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm old school, you know.
Well, I'm hoping like with the roofing project, it's not going to be an add-on, obviously. They had to put a new membrane on the roof so it doesn't leak.
Okay.
So
I get it. I'm just,
yeah,
like
it's
I
just
said,
such a big school. It takes 2 phases to do it, because they won't be able to get it done in one summer. So, and obviously, to Mr. Hoffman, to your point though, from this feasibility study that we'll talk about later this evening, if whatever the recommendation is, everything will be bidded out. Obviously, we'll make sure we do that process properly, regardless of, you know, what that recommendation is from the feasibility study.
good deal.
All right.
Chris, does it have to be a certified company? Is that why we have to take certain companies' bids?
When you look at like with CoStarz, like obviously, yeah, you're looking for companies that are approved by the state. And when we do bids, it'll be the same process. They'll have to be bonded and insured. And I'm sure, you know, Mr. Groff, when he was working for Adams County National Bank, they would do projects and he had to be, you know, they had to have certain regulations in place to do the work. And if they did build a building and he was the construction manager probably of a different company.
I wrote down all the specs and then we put those specs out to bid to different companies. And like everything else, a lot of times politics plays into it too. So, you know, depends on who's making all the decisions. But in this case here, the roofing is considered like an ongoing process. You're being proactive instead of reactive, because if you don't wait till something leaks or starts to fall in, with what we're doing down there, usually you say a roof needs done within every 20 years. So you're in the process of getting to that point. So somebody saw something that we are in need, and instead of waiting to go till it does leak, get proactive. So, but yes, Bill was right. If we keep running into problems of just giving companies the process and they expect that, they're not gonna worry about whether they did good, bad, or in between. They don't, because they're not gonna be coming back.
Yes.
But so yes, a lot of that in this feasibility.
I guess,
Help you do the projects too, so that'll all be part of their process.
Yes, Pat.
I guess what I was wondering is, are there local companies that we could give our business to instead of going to someone else?
I think it would depend on the project, to be quite honest with you. So for example, I'll give you an example. We did use local companies this summer on the CTC. So for some of the upgrades and improvements we did, that was done through Conewago Enterprises. That was done through the electric. McSherry's Town. Can't think of the name.
Crunch.
What's that?
Crunch.
Clunk's Electric.
Clunk.
Yep, Clunk's Electric.
Clunk.
And then Walton and Company out of York did the welding piece, and AIS out of York did the moving of the equipment. So that was all local people that were helping us out.
Yeah, good. I'd just like to see as much of our
And a lot of locals around here aren't
revenue go back into the district as we possibly could.
Absolutely. I think it just depends on the scope of work and how big the project is as to what our local companies can and can't handle though too. That's something that we had to take into consideration.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ways and means, we're gonna recommend accepting with appreciation a donation of a frame hoist from Ring Container Technologies for the CTC Center, valued at $2,500. Can't speak highly enough of Ring Container and what they've been donating between convex mirrors and frame hoists. They've been a true partner and cannot thank them enough for everything they're doing, as all of our local manufacturers have been just partners in the CTC, and we can't thank them enough. They're truly making a difference for us. Property and supplies, we do have one this month. Ooh, I know, exciting. So we are going to recommend approval for the American Cancer Society Relay for Life with Jenna Klunk as the representative to use the parking lots of New Oxford High School and CVIS on July 10th from 2 p.m. until 11 p.m. for the Relay for Life for the Hanover area drive-through at no charge, with the provision of proof of insurance as per board policy, and for the services of custodians, secretaries, cooks, and or technical personnel as needed. So really cool. They did this in Lancaster. They did a Relay for Life drive-through. And so they're going to use our campus to kind of mimic what they did in Lancaster with theirs. You drive in your car and you're going to drive through. You get out, you get your picture taken, you get back in your car, you watch a short video on a screen, hence the drive-through, and then literally you exit. And they decide,
I did see that in the news.
yeah, it's a great way to still have the Walk for Life, the Life for Relay, and to raise money for American Cancer Society. So
And it's all outside, so.
and it's outside. So, and it's in July. So we were all for it. I just wanted to make you aware of that. Okay. Assistant Superintendent's report, Dr. Perry.
All right. Good evening. I have one item. for discussion this evening. But it's a large item, so hang in there with me as we go through this. So this is regarding our state testing. So the Keystones, the PSSA, and PASA. The PASA, which we don't often hear about, is the Pennsylvania Alternate System of Assessments. This test is for our most neediest of learners that we have in the district. And so generally speaking, the guidelines suggest that it should only be 1% of your overall student population at any given time. We're sitting at approximately 1.8%, so we're slightly above, which is not uncommon. There are many, many school districts that have that, and it's due in large part all of the services that we provide. So earlier this evening, we talked about how our numbers with our autistic support classroom, for example, we're getting larger. And so we're serving a lot of needy students within our community, which is a good thing. But that test is also included as part of these other testing. So the PSSA, which is the Pennsylvania System of School Assessments. So those are the assessments in elementary school, middle school. And then of course we have our Keystone exams, which are biology, algebra 1, and literature, which take place at the high school traditionally for biology and literature. And algebra 1 is usually 8th grade in middle school or at the high school level for those tests. So that's just the primer on the tests that we actually offer. In last month's Assistant Superintendent report, I let you know we had no idea what was going on with testing and that we were waiting for some guidance from the United States Department of Education as well as the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Dr. Rudisil and I met with Curriculum Cabinet last Monday, I believe. And very shortly thereafter, I told them the same thing. We have really, only this little tidbit of information that came out to us the previous Friday. So this information is only about a week old, and we're trying to digest it and try to figure out what our next steps are. So the gist of it is this. The United States Department of Ed is not asking for any waivers for state testing as they did last spring. So last spring, you recall that no testing was required due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They are not providing the opportunities for states to apply for those waivers. What they did say, however, is you may apply, each state may apply for what they call flexibilities. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what those flexibilities are. So we are testing. One of the major flexibilities that they talked about is that the scores do not account for teacher and principal evaluations. So historically, based upon our school performance profile scores, that would impact a principal's overall evaluation. It would get thrown into the tumbler of Voodoo math that let us know how our principals were doing. Same thing with teachers. If they had children that were accounted for as part of the allocations where this teacher has this percentage and so on and so forth, again, Voodoo math, it would impact their evaluation based upon the overall student performance. So they're saying that that will not happen. So this year's evaluations, the scores for these tests will not impact teachers or principals. The other flexibility that Pennsylvania had offered and was part of their plan is that no school would be identified as a school in need of improvement. So often they'll use these test data to make determinations about whether particular schools are in need of targeted assistance and need additional technical assistance from our local intermediate units, et cetera. So they're saying nobody is going to be held accountable and will move into school improvement regardless of what the test scores are. So the other item that they did allow us saying, well, you can test in the spring, and I'll give you the specifics of the testing window, but not only can you test in the spring, you can test through the summer and you can test through September. So that was a flexibility that Pennsylvania had asked for. And this predominantly, it kind of makes sense for a lot of our schools in the Commonwealth who have not yet had any face-to-face instruction, unlike us. with the hybrid or the K-3 face-to-face every day. We do have schools in the Commonwealth who, the minute that March 13th came down, they've never seen a human teacher since then. And so it's really for those schools as they begin to bring children back to schools that now they want to extend that opportunity for them to at least be somewhat successful in these assessments. This was done, and I'm going to quote what the state said, because this was a key, very important point that they wanted out there, that this was done so as not to systematically disadvantage historically underserved student groups, maintain a focus more on meeting the students' emotional and social needs as education recovery continues. This approach provides school districts flexibility in administering assessments while ensuring Pennsylvania has needed data to identify areas of learning loss, opportunities for learning acceleration. So gifted education, for example, we need that data to help us make decisions about what to do with children, and to better understand the inequitable impact of the pandemic on learners, including low-income students, students of color, English language learners, and students with disabilities. So of course, as educational leaders, we want to make sure that we're leveling the playing field as best we can under these circumstances, and I feel like we've done an excellent job. So they had proposed, meaning the state, they had proposed the spring testing window as follows. The PASA test is March 8th through May 7th. So it's an extended window than what it might traditionally be. The PSSA would be April 19th, wait for it, until May 28th. So it's a month and a half. That is our last identified student day on our calendar. The Keystones, Biology, Algebra 1, and Literature, May 17th through June 25th. So that's the window. However, we have until September 21st to turn in all of our testing materials. So as you may recall, we tested in the second wave Keystone testing in the winter at the high school. We tried this extended window. So everything was to be returned in December. They extended the window until March 30th. We have taken advantage of that extension for makeups for students due to quarantine, due to illness. So we have taken advantage of that. For the Keystone window, however, that window extends until June 25th. So that window is much smaller. May 17th until May 28th, if that's our last student day and the day of graduation. So that provides a little bit of a conundrum there for the Keystone exams, particularly. The other ones, I feel like those are reasonable timelines. We do plan to test all students through May 28th. And we also want to include the Conewago Valley Online Academy students, as well as our Lincoln's Edge students. In the winter Keystone exams, Lincoln's Edge took care of that. We want to bring our kids back for testing. These scores do impact us. So while we're not held accountable for school improvement purposes, they're still our students. Presumably, they would be placed on a bus to come to us, placed on another bus to go to the Lincoln Intermediate Unit, then placed on another bus to go to York. As a parent, I would never want that for my child to hop 3 buses before they sit for hours and hours of assessments with people that they don't know. So we want to bring all of those children to campus who are presently with Lincoln's Edge. The principals were 100% on board with that because they're our kids. So for the spring testing. So my recommendation is that we fall and we test within this window. And the reason that I say that is what I know and what I've learned as a classroom teacher is that you want to assess as closely to that time that you teach. So the Keystone was designed to be an end of course assessment. I don't see what good that's going to do for a child to go their entire summer when there is research on summer slide, and then ask them to come to us after pandemic and recovery over the summer, et cetera, come back to us in September. It's like, Keystone test, let's do an Algebra 1 test. You know, further impairing their educational process, particularly if we want to bring all of our children back face to face. So that is my recommendation, that we do attempt to test within these windows. In the news, you're going to hear things like, well, they only have to take half the test. That was the flexibility, that's out there that the United States Department of Education said, we will allow for that. Just, test half the test. Pennsylvania already has the test printed, so that allowance is not available to us. So you'll hear about that though in the news, and you'll be asked perhaps, by community members, well, why does my kid have to sit for the whole test? Well, because the whole test was printed and they don't give us the guidance to determine that we can just do section 1 and 3. If we could, I would, no doubt. But moving forward under the circumstances, that is, my best recommendation at this time is we all know more guidance comes out. It seems like practically on a daily basis that can change this by the time we speak next week. But this is where we are today, and I'll certainly keep you in the loop as that changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. Always a good time.
So so the first test is going to take place in the next couple of weeks.
That's correct. We're prepared.
Okay, very good.
We're ready. And I will say, Dr. Perry and our plan is in June to share with you guys actually data on our students and what they were able to do this year and the growth, or maybe not the growth they had. We don't know. We'll find out. We give our own local assessments through a company called Linkit. And working with Linkit, we're going to create reports for the board that will show by grade level, by strand, by anchor, by standard, just so you could see as a district what we were able to do. I think it will give us a much better picture than the state assessment will, knowing that the last time the state assessment was given was 2 years ago, and now it's going to be given now. So where we have this 3 years worth of data from Linkit to show growth of these kids, I think it will show a better indicator of what we're doing as a school district and what our kids are seeing. For my report tonight, I just want to talk a little bit about the feasibility study that I've been mentioning. I want to give you an update on Aramark, give you an update on COVID-19 and Conewago Valley a little bit, and then also talk about a potential return for students in grades 4 through 6. And so first thing we'll talk about is the feasibility study.
I'm over there.
21. No, we're not 21. So feasibility study. So as you know, in, I believe it was January, we did a demographic study, and you know about the predictive growth of our district. 1,355 new homes in the next 5 to 8 years, potential is 750 students. So then we're like, okay, what does that really mean for us? And this is where the feasibility study comes in. So I met with a company called Crabtree and Roball out of Mechanicsburg, Harrisburg area. And they came down, they met with myself and Dr. Perry along with Lori Duncan, just to talk about what they do and what services they can provide. So the idea of the feasibility study is this company will come in, they'll sit down with us, they'll walk through our district, they'll take measurements of our rooms, they'll look at our student population, everything to show us what our buildings would look like at capacity. Then from there, they'll take that decision insight model that we have, and they'll talk about what the next steps for our district would be. Along with that, Dr. Perry and I talked about a 5 to 10 year facility management plan for our campus and for our district, and they do that piece also. So they get public input, they run surveys, and then they present to the board all the findings that they have. And then from there, they give recommendations of what we should do. But ultimately, we as the board decide what we will do, or as a district too. So they may say, hey, based upon all this, looking at your buildings, you don't need to build. But what you do need to do is you need to do X, Y, and Z. Or they may say, all right, looking at these numbers, you're going to need to build. We recommend you restructure or realign your district, and you might have K through 4 buildings again. And you might do a 5 through 8 building and then a 9 through 12 campus. You know what I mean? But they'll give recommendations. And then the board and myself and Dr. Perry will all sit down and then we decide what the next steps are. If we continue to use Crabtree and Roble as the architects of that project, then we would have to begin the bidding process for all the construction pieces of everything. Hence, Mr. Hoffman, and yes, Mr. Hoffman, we would definitely have to bid out all that stuff. There's no doubt about it, depending what that is. But for us to partner with Crabtree and Roble will be a cost of $7,500. And then if we choose to stay with Crabtree and Roble as our architects, that $7,500 just goes into the overall cost of whatever the project may be. So that it ends up being, we don't pay them $7,500, it just goes into the cost. So it's part of what they do then. So that's our feasibility study. Next week, we'll have that as a board agenda item for you to vote on. If you're okay with it and you vote for it, then obviously we'll proceed to, Dr. Perry and I will proceed to work with Crabtree and Roble and move forward as fast as we can in regards to trying to get the process going. Because they said it takes a good 4 to 6 months of study. So it's not going to be, we partner with them and then three weeks later they're done. It's going to be 4 to 6 months. They're going to come. They're going to be in the schools. They're going to be walking. They're going to be talking with students. They're going to be talking with parents. They're going to hold town halls and bring people in to get their opinions on everything. So it's a lengthy process, but it's one that I think, I don't think we've ever done it here. Or if we did, maybe we did, but I don't know.
For CVIS.
CVIS was
Yeah,
done?
for CVIS, and that's when I came on the board. They opened
Okay.
up and say, hey, you understand building? We need you.
Yeah.
What they did, and they did have even the drawings, we had a community,
Yes.
the auditorium, laid everything out and stuff like that. But I will tell you, the process took about 5 years. So from the time they decided we need to do this till you get everything going. So the way, as I look around the community and see everything that's going on, the longer we wait,
Yes.
the more we'll be behind the 8 ball if we don't bring somebody in and guide us as to what we need to do for the future, because the future is now. It's not waiting on us.
No.
So
It's not, and that's, as you pass and you see more ground being broken and
yes,
That's really a good deal. That's not a bad price.
it's really not. And like I said, in the end, I can tell you, and Dr. Perry's had worked with them up at State College and they do good work. I know, I went to visit at least one other site they're working on right now just to see what they're doing.
Are they the ones that did Mechanicsburg?
Yes.
Okay.
Had a massive reorganization.
Yes, and they're doing, up in Mechanicsburg, they're doing, every school's getting redone. And, because
they're well known, and they've
What's
been
that?
around. They were always in Hershey when we went to
Yes.
the Hershey week and stuff like that. So yeah, they're.
Yes, they do most of the work and they do good work, so they're reputable. So like I said, next week, assuming that you guys approve it, we'll proceed literally that week, then next week with them moving forward, so. Aramark update. Want to give you guys, everyone, an update on Aramark. So Aramark has been in the district, walking around, getting measurements, they're ordering stuff. We have supplies coming in from Aramark as we speak. New vacuum cleaners, new cleaning carts. They are purchasing a scrubbing machine for the floors that I guess you sit and ride on versus push.
Tony.
They told me I'm not allowed to use it already, but the idea is they said it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. And they said that one thing they really loved about our schools already, they're like, normally when they come in to take over a place, the facilities tend to be run down or not in good shape, and that's not the case. They're very complimentary of our schools, how clean they are. They're excited to come in and make them even better. We had a town hall meeting where we brought in all the custodians so they could ask questions. And then from there, we also had 2 days of interviews where all our custodians came in, they were offered positions. If they wanted to, it's their choice whether or not they wish to take them. But that's all done at this point. So now they're just, they're hoping to be, they're trying to get everything ready to go. So on April 1st, when they take over, it will be seamless for everybody. I just want to give you an update where we're at with that. I know they are frantically filling other positions. We do have some, when we get to our personnel section, you'll see we have some people that are resigning and looking for other positions, not with the district. So they are already on that also, looking for those, so that when we go, there's no lapse in anything. It's a clean. And they already talked about also bringing in other first shift managers from other districts to come down and help us with the transition process also. As a bigger company, they can do that. Questions on feasibility, questions on Aramark at all?
I have a question. about
Yes.
that. In terms of the employees that are like moving over, is there going to be like a waiting period for benefits coverage?
Nothing. It would be seamless.
So he did tell us that the night,
Yep.
Sorry,
it would
I
be-
may have forgotten, you told us that.
Yep. Nope. They will, their last day will be with us March 31st. They'll start April 1st. There'll be no lapse in pay. There'll be no lapse in health insurance coverage, nothing. We worked all that out with Aramark so that our employees would be taken care of.
and their days off time too.
Oh, good.
They don't
That's
lose their
good.
days.
Seniority is that, so if they have 17 years with us as a district, they start in Aramark, you're 17.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, everything that man told us, if he holds true to it, there shouldn't be a reason why, or people shouldn't be satisfied with what they're offering.
They're gonna either match or raise everyone's current rate of pay. So that's the other nice piece. No one's gonna lose money in this deal.
It's great.
Cool.
All right. Just give you an update on COVID-19 and Conewago Valley. So I keep getting questions, what do these numbers mean on the dashboard? Why do we have to have these numbers on the dashboard that we have? And so if you recall back in November, I think it was November, we signed an attestation form. Part of that attestation form, we signed that was to make sure that we did not have to stay in remote. Because part of the process of that attestation form was if we did not sign it, our district would have to go remote learning until we are out of substantial as a county. Well, every week I check, and every week we're still in substantial as a county. I did see other counties now are starting to move to low and moderate, but yet Adams County is still in substantial. As of this morning this afternoon at 2 o'clock when I checked.
Aren't we real close though? I thought we were real close.
I'm sure we are, but
You're never gonna get change one day to the next.
yes, well, they won't let us know till Monday after 2. So it's just how they operate. But what those numbers mean, obviously they see the numbers 3, they see the numbers 4, sometimes they drop back to 0, sometimes they stay at 1. And what I need to explain to everybody was, when you see something go back to 0, one of two things have happened. Either A, we reached our limit and the school is closed for 3 days, which then it resets to 0, or we've had multiple days off because of weather and the building was able to be cleaned and we were able to start back at 0 that way because there was no staff or students in the buildings. And that just happened this past, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. That was a rough 2 weeks. When we had all the snow. The district was closed down. We were working from home. The only people in actually were the custodians due to snow removal, but they were also cleaning. So they were able to get the buildings cleaned and we were able to start back over at 0. So right now, when you look at the dashboard, the high school has the most cases, again, with about 3 or 4 right now. But then our middle school, I think, has maybe 1, CVS 1, and of course our elementaries are just rocking it with 0 piece. So that's where we're at. As soon as we move back to moderate for 2 straight weeks, the attestation form goes away. We no longer need to follow it. The numbers no longer apply anymore. I will still obviously keep updating the COVID dashboard, but the numbers do not matter. The only time that we would need to close them would be based upon the Department of Health telling us, due to the number of cases now, you must close. But they weren't doing it before. I'm not too worried about it moving forward. Right now, those numbers, that attestation form holds us there. But like I said, the minute we get to moderate 2 straight weeks, the attestation form is null and void, and we go back just to our original health and safety plan, which will be nice. So along those lines, as we start to see that steadily decline in numbers for us, which is a good thing, we want to talk about the potential return for students in grades 4 through 6. If you recall, and I know Dr. Perry mentioned it earlier about reopening schools, you hear a lot of K through 8, reopening schools K through 8, getting kids in K through 8. So for us, our next step is to look 4 through 6. We need to get our elementary kids back in every day. We need every kid, every student, and I see Luke Crayville over there holding up the number 12, and I know what he means by that. We need all our kids back. We absolutely do. But right now, we are going to focus just on the elementary with the idea that we can hopefully then talk about, maybe post Easter getting all our kids back, if not before. But I will say right now, the focus will be on 4 through 6. And one of the things when we talk about this is, tomorrow we are going to send out a survey to the parents, all the CBIS parents, asking them to fill it out, asking, hey, where is your child now? Are they in school hybrid? Are they Lincoln's Edge? Are they somewhere else? All right, if we open up, what are you going to do with your child? Are you going to send them back to us? Or are they going to stay where they're at? Kind of thing. So we just need to know for planning purposes. If all goes well, we'll open that survey tomorrow. We'll run it till this Sunday, the 7th, till 9 p.m. At 9 p.m. then, what I'll do on Monday is I'll report out to the board the results of the survey so that you can see. If all goes well, we would look to do a soft opening then the following week. So we would look to take March 15th, that Monday, and make it a remote learning day for students. And that would give us a chance to get the school prepped and ready and have our teachers ready to go also on that day. They can teach from school and work and also do their Zoom sessions, but then also be ready to go for tomorrow, that Tuesday. On Tuesday, the 16th, we would look to bring in 4th grade along with hybrid 5th and 6th. On Wednesday, the 17th, then, we would do grades 4 and 5 with hybrid 6th grade. And then on Thursday, the 17th, luck of the Irish, we bring in everybody, 4, 5, 6. And we just continue the rest of the year with all our kids, 4, 5, 6. We get that soft opening. And then to Mr. Crayville's point, we can then start to look at what does that look like 7, 8? What does that look like 9 through 12? Is it even possible? The biggest issue, honestly, when we look at 9 through 12, quite honestly, is it's just yes, we have higher numbers because, it's proven that, teenagers higher up can be a little bit more susceptible to COVID. The other piece of it is high school is way different than elementary, where we're not switching, there's not the movement, and there's not as much mixing of kids where, you can have sophomores, freshmen, juniors in the same class and vice versa. But it doesn't mean it can't be done. And to your point, Mr. Crayville, we'll look into it and we'll continue to look into it. So over the next, and we started that process, if you recall, even back in November, we were looking at it. We have the groundwork laid. We can just continue to do that by meeting.
Well, I think you stated it before, but what's the time frame, or like if we said on the middle of the month, we want to do this, how quick of a turnaround?
Well, this is about a 2-week turnaround. When you think about it, like we're going to survey this week, we got to find desks. They're somewhere. I don't even need to buy them. We just literally have to find them because we stored them everywhere possible. We just got to find out where they're at to get them back in the rooms, and then we got to set up the rooms. Again, knowing that social distance is important, we'll do everything we can to keep that social distance to the greatest extent possible. That's the word in the state that we will follow.
Is that dependent on getting the moderate rating?
That's dependent. Moderate helps. The 4 through 6 we could push through, just because I know that's been a push from the CDC and from the local, the federal government to get students back in K through 8. They have not pushed the 9 through 12. If you notice that, they pushed actually, I don't like the recommendation they have 9 through 12 because they say to keep it remote. I don't agree with that when you look at that recommendation. So based upon the recommendation from the CDC that kids can be back at school K through 8, we'll look to do 4 through 6 and then work with our middle school to see what that would look like 7 through 8. Some of that too is, we surveyed the 4 through 6 teachers. Dr. Aramark did, just talk with them. How comfortable are you bringing students back? And they were all for it. They're like, look, we need our kids back. We need them in our classrooms. Because we do recognize, good or bad, this remote learning has put some kids at a disadvantage. You can level the playing field all you want by giving the technology, but at the end of the day, you're only good as your environment and your supports. And so we got to look at that. And especially at a 4 through 6 level, they're not going to be as independent as a high school kid. That being said, though, some of our high school kids are definitely not as independent as others. And that depends on environment. You're absolutely right.
The thing that I keep hearing though, my student was a grade A student,
Yep.
you know, in school. Now he's barely making C's.
Yes.
Now is knowing they need the testing to prove how bad it is.
Yeah.
Yes, and testing will show that. I mean,
Yeah.
it will. There's no doubt it will. But our goal, you know, like I said, our goal would definitely be, you know, to get these 4-6 back successfully. My only fear, honestly, with bringing any kids back, it's not in the classroom. It's not in the school. Because most of the time, if you look at our cases, they are independent of each other. Other than maybe one time where we did, you know, full disclosure, we had quite a bit that were just connected. All the dots were connected, and we're like, wow, we had to close the school. We had to get just a hold on everything. And it helped out that, you know, it ended up being a 5-day closure, snow hit too, and everything else. There was a blessing in disguise for that school, because since then they've been great. You know, looking at this, we definitely have to make sure that we, you know, for me, the transportation's the biggest issue, because you can't separate kids on the bus. You know, right now we can, but reality is if we go back, now you're looking at 2 to 3 per seat again. And that's tough. The other challenge is lunches. I mean, that's just a fact. Lunches are a challenge. Right now, K through 3, our kids eat in the classroom. 4 through 6, they're going to do a modified lunch. Dr. Armacost is trying to figure it out, where I guarantee some will be in the classroom, some will be in the cafeteria, because the reality is you can't fit 300 to 900 kids in that cafeteria throughout the day at one time. That's going to be the challenge at the high school level, especially with lunches. We are using the high school auditorium lobby right now for lunches, along with the cafeteria, to be able to try to space kids out appropriately. And it just becomes more of a challenge, obviously, if we have everyone there trying to figure out those waves and so forth. But it's a challenge that I know, you know what, if you know, we go to moderate, we'll look into it and we'll tackle it and see what we can do. Because I know for our seniors especially, they would probably, well, maybe some wouldn't. But I think the majority would love to be in school for at least even if it's for the last 2 months of the school year, to be around each other and to have that time.
I think they'll feel that they have more of a chance of a normalized end of
School.
high school
Yep.
if they're actually allowed to be in school. Because
Yes.
I know the challenge right now, student council is fighting, parents are fighting, everybody's fighting, trying to figure out how to give them everything they want for the end of the year. And, you know, just today, Wolf comes down and says, oh, we're gonna change restrictions. And they're like, hey, so now we can, like, hang on, just, you know,
Well, I mean, to your
patience
point,
right now
even
is the
restrictions that were
biggest.
lifted today.
Yeah.
Really don't change much.
No, it went from 10% to 15 or something,
Yeah,
like,
10
come
to
on.
15% indoor and up to 20% outdoor.
Yeah,
I was like,
huge.
okay. They lifted the travel.
Four
ban,
more people.
which Made no sense to me anyway, because I know they were saying, even if you had the vaccination, you don't necessarily have to quarantine, but if you traveled and had the vaccination, you still had to quarantine.
Right.
Yeah.
You can wrestle and swap bodily fluids, but you can't handshake after.
Yes.
You know, it's some of the contradictions are horrible, but patience, I think, is key.
Yeah.
In figuring that out.
So why can't we look at putting a plan together now? Because if we wait till April and you're looking at 2 weeks, then
No,
you're in the middle of April.
We would work on the plan now with an idea that maybe after Easter we could return kids.
Why
We
can't
wouldn't start in April.
Why can't we do it at the end of March?
What's that? What's the
How about the
difference?
end of March?
April 1st, then we go on vacation.
No April Fool.
Huh?
No April Fool.
No, but I'm saying, like, at this point, the end of March, it's Easter vacation anyway. So ideally, it'd be better, you know what I mean, to get through March, to see how CVS handles the return 2 weeks. That would give us.
So
a
are
better
you
indication,
thinking
too.
of 7 through 12? Or are
I'm
you
thinking-
middle?
I'm thinking I'll meet with both and see what that looks like, see the impact it has, and go from there. I think, like I said, a lot of that, we'll survey the teachers.
Well, that
So-
was, yeah, I didn't know if any of them do double duty, like teach high school and middle school classes at all, like that.
There's just one or two, and music teacher wise, that's it. So that piece of it won't impact that
That's what
much.
I was wondering.
Actually, music wise, I think it's just one. I think we're down to just sharing one between the high school and middle school now.
So how is Maryland handling it? Because they all went back full time.
Some of those schools still haven't been back full time. They were told March 1st. And I can tell you, the one person that works for Aramark lives in Maryland. She says their school system's still not back up and running full. They're looking at a hybrid model right now.
Pick and choosing.
And, well, again, to Dr. Perry's point earlier, schools in Maryland, unless they were private, those kids have not seen a school since March 13th. So now they're just getting a hybrid. In Virginia too, same thing. I think they're just getting a hybrid in Virginia at best.
A lot of Virginia has already been hybrid, but the private schools
Yes,
they never close.
That's
They
right.
close a day.
Yep.
They told the parents, if your kid has a fever, they must stay home. And they haven't had a lick of trouble. They've had their sports, they've had everything throughout the year. So if a private school can do it, why can't everybody else do it? And that's what
size
everybody
plays
keeps
a part of
throwing at.
that though.
Yeah,
Size plays a part of that. I mean, in private school,
Understandably, but the whole thing of it is, they were successful throughout this whole process. And size does matter. But then if you have the size, the numbers should go coordinate with it. And that's not what Pennsylvania's doing. That's why we're so hand tied.
Pennsylvania's doing. But I mean, again, like I said, we'll look into it, Luke. We'll start that planning process. So the idea would be, surveys sent out maybe right before Easter to give us an idea. If that's the case, we'll look at a slow start of some sort. Again, we wouldn't just say, here you go at it. It would be a slow start like we are looking at for CVIS, where maybe it's 7th, 8th, and then it could be a 9, 10, and then 11, 12, whatever the case may be. But we'll have to wait and see what's what.
So for fall, is the plan full time for fall currently?
Yes, the plan right now for fall, unless the state tells me otherwise, again, if the state tells me otherwise,
No, I understand that.
I'm going to
Okay.
assume though, that for us, fall, we go back to opening up like we normally would. There may be a few caveats, who knows? We may be wearing masks forever, it seems. I can't speak to that, you know what I mean? That's gonna depend on the Department of Health and what guidance they give us, but if you ask me today, and if anyone's on the live stream listening, please don't quote, but I would envision us being back full next year, no questions asked. We start day one like we normally would on a normal school year. Like I said, there may be other stipulations in place, like having to wear a mask or whatever, but I'll deal with that as it comes along. But the goal for next year would be to open up full like we normally do, to have our kids in, because that's where they need to be. We recognize that more than ever. I know, I can't speak for Luke, but I can speak for myself. And I have 2 sons that are home 3 days out of the 5. And I just pray when I get home that one of them's alive, that the other one has not beaten the other one to death, just because of having to be around each other all the time.
yeah.
All right, let's go on first.
So,
Just to your point though, I mean, so Easter is the 2nd. So essentially the start 7th and 8th or 7th, whatever that breakout is, the surveys are going to go out in 2 weeks. You're almost talking about a rolling 2 week. Survey goes out this week for 4 through 6. And then in 2 weeks, when we start 4 through 6 in person, that survey is going out for 7 or 8, 7 through 12, however, that's determined. So it's essentially worst case, you get 3 waves in 2 weeks. So in 6 weeks, everybody should be back, which is roughly April 15th.
Okay, with the survey, is there any way you can make a statement in there that, if your child is sick, that,
I don't know how many more times I can make that
no, I'm
statement.
just saying, you know, are you willing to keep them home? Because you must realize the impact that when you send a sick child to school, it's gonna put everything back to what it originally was. So if you want your kid to come to school, then please participate as a responsible adult, that if your kid is sick, you're gonna keep them home.
But that's part of your issue. Size matters, but that's part of your issue between the private school parents and the public school parents. Because the private school parents are stereotypically, I know, more responsible and forward-thinking, and, you know, it makes it difficult when you're not dealing with that same caliber parent in a public school district.
So I can
Although I
can
agree.
tell you this year, to that point, we've had several cases where the child has been in school for 3 days with symptoms. And the parent knew it, but it was an inconvenience because of work. I'm gonna send my kid. Well, now, the amount of work that left us to do and sense of contact tracing, finding close contacts, that takes a day, sometimes even more till we're done. That puts more stress on our principals, more stress on us to get that out. So there, you know, that happens. And I can state that in my letters. I can state that. I've stated it numerous times. Please, please, please be vigilant. But at the end of the day, I can't, you
I
know.
had to keep Morgan home just for exposure.
Yes, yes, you're
And
right.
the nurse specifically said, thank you for being proactive about it, because she said, this is the easiest case I've dealt with.
Yes,
She was out for like 3 months, but
it seemed like
it
it.
seemed like it. But yeah, it was sad to hear that I was not the norm, you know.
No, and luckily, you know, we're back down to 10 days of quarantine versus
Yeah.
the 14, because reality is if someone in your family has it, you have to isolate for 10 and then quarantine for 14. That was 24 days of school, or 24 days that you potentially missed. So we're down to 20 if that happens.
It's not
Say
happening
4
again.
days, but it's better than 24.
We've been through it, no
Yep.
more.
All right, with that being said, I'm going to stop the live stream and we'll go into a executive session and talk personnel.